The summer of 1977 was supposed to be like any other at Camp Scott, a Girl Scout camp nestled in the dense woods near Locust Grove, Oklahoma. For nearly 50 years, young girls had been making memories there, learning outdoor skills, singing around campfires, and forming lifelong friendships. But in the early hours of June 13, 1977, this peaceful sanctuary would become the site of one of Oklahoma's most haunting crimes, a crime that would forever change the way we think about children's safety at summer camps. The story actually begins 2 months earlier, during a pre-season training session at Camp Scott. A counselor discovered her tent had been ransacked, and inside was a disturbing note written on a piece of paper stolen from the camp kitchen. The message threatened that 3 campers would be murdered. At the time, the camp directors dismissed it as a prank, a decision that would haunt them forever. On June 12, 1977, 140 excited young girls arrived at Camp Scott for the first day of summer camp. Among them were 3 friends: Lori Lee Farmer, who had just turned 8, Doris Denise Milner, age 10, and Michelle Heather Goose, age 9. The 3 girls were assigned to Tent 8 in the Kiowa unit, the furthest campsite from the counselor's quarters. None of them could have known that this would be their last night alive. The evening started normally enough. The girls participated in the traditional first night activities, including a dinner of hamburgers and an opening campfire ceremony. Around 7:30 p.m., a thunderstorm rolled in, sending everyone back to their tents earlier than usual. The counselors made their final rounds at 10 p.m., checking on all the girls before turning in for the night. At approximately 6 a.m. the next morning, a counselor headed toward the showers discovered a horrifying sight. In a sleeping bag on a trail about 150 yards from Tent 8 lay the body of Doris Denise Milner. The authorities were immediately called, and upon searching the area, they found the bodies of Lori Farmer and Michelle Goose inside their tent. All 3 girls had been sexually assaulted and murdered. The investigation revealed that the killer had somehow entered Tent 8 during the night. The girls had been bludgeoned and strangled. The crime scene was particularly disturbing, with evidence suggesting the perpetrator had taken his time, even having a meal inside the tent during or after the murders. Investigators found a flashlight, duct tape, and rope, indicating this was a carefully planned attack. The brutality of the crimes shocked the nation. Camp Scott closed permanently, its gates locked for the final time. But the question remained: who could have committed such a heinous act? Local authorities quickly focused their investigation on Gene Leroy Hart, a Cherokee man who had escaped from prison 4 years earlier. Hart had been serving time for kidnapping and raping 2 pregnant women, as well as 4 counts of burglary. He knew the area well, having grown up just a few miles from Camp Scott. The evidence against Hart was compelling. Hair samples consistent with his type were found at the crime scene. A prison-issued glasses lens was discovered near the bodies, similar to ones Hart had been issued. Local Native Americans had reported seeing Hart in the area, and he was known to hide in the dense woods surrounding the camp. But the investigation wasn't without its problems. The crime scene had been compromised by the heavy rain and the number of people who had walked through the area before it was properly secured. Some evidence was lost or damaged, and the primitive forensic techniques of the 1970s couldn't provide the certainty we might expect today. After a 10-month manhunt, Gene Leroy Hart was finally captured in April 1978, living in a makeshift camp in the Cherokee Hills. The trial that followed was one of the longest and most expensive in Oklahoma history at that time. Hart's defense team argued that the physical evidence was circumstantial and that local law enforcement had targeted him because of his Native American heritage and criminal history. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a verdict: not guilty on all counts. The decision stunned the victims' families and many members of the community who were convinced of Hart's guilt. Hart never had the chance to enjoy his freedom, however. Less than 2 months after his acquittal, he died of a heart attack in prison while serving time for his prior convictions. The case didn't end with Hart's death. In 2008, authorities conducted new DNA tests on items from the crime scene, hoping that advanced technology might finally provide definitive answers. The results were inconclusive, but investigators stated that they couldn't rule Hart out as the killer. In fact, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation maintains that Hart was their only suspect and that they're confident he was responsible for the murders. The impact of the Girl Scout murders extended far beyond the immediate tragedy. Summer camps across the country implemented stricter security measures. The case led to discussions about supervision ratios, campground layouts, and emergency response protocols. Many camps began conducting more thorough background checks on staff and instituted new safety procedures. For the families of Lori, Denise, and Michelle, the pain never truly subsided. Their parents became advocates for child safety, working to ensure that other families wouldn't have to endure similar tragedies. The girls' memories live on through scholarships established in their names and through the changes their deaths inspired in summer camp safety protocols. The site of Camp Scott still stands today, though it's private property now. The buildings are deteriorating, slowly being reclaimed by the Oklahoma wilderness. Local residents say the area feels heavy with sadness, as if the land itself remembers the tragedy that occurred there. Some claim to hear children's laughter in the woods or see mysterious lights at night, though these stories are likely born from the human need to make sense of senseless violence. What makes the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders particularly haunting is not just the brutality of the crimes or the young age of the victims, but the violation of something we hold sacred, the innocence of childhood. Summer camp is supposed to be a place of joy and discovery, where young people learn independence and make lasting memories. Instead, Camp Scott became a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil can intrude even in the most innocent of places. The case also raises uncomfortable questions about justice and closure. Was Jean Leroy Hart truly guilty, or did his previous crimes and heritage make him an inconvenient suspect? Did the primitive forensic techniques of the 1970s fail to catch the real killer, or did they simply fail to prove Hart's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt? These questions will likely never be answered definitively. Perhaps the most important legacy of this tragedy is the way it changed how we protect our children. The murders forced us to confront the balance between allowing children the freedom to grow and keeping them safe from harm. Today's summer camps are different places than they were in 1977, with security measures that would have seemed excessive back then, but now feel necessary. For the residents of Locust Grove and the wider Oklahoma community, the summer of 1977 marked the end of an innocence. It was a reminder that even in the most idyllic settings, vigilance is necessary. The Oklahoma Girl Scout murders stand as a tragic chapter in American crime history, one that continues to resonate more than 4 decades later. As time passes, fewer people remember the details of what happened at Camp Scott, but the case's impact endures. 3 young girls lost their lives that night, but their deaths led to changes that may have saved countless others. While that's small comfort to those who loved Lori, Denise, and Michelle, it ensures that their deaths were not entirely in vain. The dense woods around Locust Grove keep their secrets, and the full truth of what happened that June night may never be known. But the story of the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders reminds us that the price of safety is eternal vigilance, and that sometimes the most important lessons come from our greatest tragedies.